Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about something that's both subtle and profound, habits you probably don't even realize are trauma responses. You might do these things every single day without understanding why. Your friends might do them. Your partner might do them. And you've probably judged yourself or others for these habits without realizing they're actually adaptive responses to past trauma. I'm a therapist who specializes in trauma, and I've spent years watching clients have these aha moments when they realize that a habit they've had their whole life is actually a survival mechanism. So today, I'm breaking down 7 innocent-looking habits that are actually trauma responses. And here's what's important: recognizing these habits doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means you were incredibly smart. Your nervous system figured out how to survive. These habits helped you. The question is whether they're still helping you now. Let's start with the first one: chronic apologizing. You say sorry constantly. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You apologize for existing. You apologize for taking up space. You apologize for your opinion. You apologize for your emotions. You probably apologize multiple times a day. If you grew up in an environment where your presence or your emotions or your needs were treated as a problem, if you had a parent who blamed you for their emotions, if you had a parent who was unpredictably angry, and you learned that preventing their anger meant managing yourself perfectly, if you were scapegoated in your family, you learned to apologize preemptively. You learned that if you say sorry first, maybe you can prevent someone's anger. Maybe you can prevent punishment. Maybe you can prevent abandonment. Now, as an adult, apologizing has become your automatic response to almost everything. Someone bumps into you. You apologize. You express an opinion. You apologize. You have a need. You apologize. This habit made perfect sense when you needed it. But now it might be preventing you from being taken seriously. It might be preventing you from having boundaries. It might be making you a target for people who take advantage of your constant apologizing. The second habit is being perpetually busy or productive. You can't just relax. You can't just sit. You always have to be doing something. You feel guilty when you're not being productive. You schedule your entire life. You can't enjoy leisure because you're thinking about the next task. This is often a trauma response to chaos. If you grew up in an unstable, chaotic environment, your nervous system learned that staying busy keeps you safe. If you keep moving, if you keep doing, maybe you can control outcomes. Maybe you can prevent disaster. Maybe you can earn your right to exist by constantly producing. Some people develop this response after experiencing loss or abandonment. They learned that if they stopped being useful, people would leave. So they stay busy forever. The third habit is extreme difficulty saying no. You say yes to everything. You take on more than you can handle. You prioritize other people's needs over your own. You feel guilty when you set boundaries. You have a hard time even articulating what you want because you're so focused on what others want. This is usually a trauma response to having your boundaries violated or to having been controlled. If you grew up with a controlling parent, you might have learned that resistance led to punishment, so you became compliant. If you experienced abuse, you might have learned that you don't have the right to say no. If you experienced neglect or abandonment, you might have learned that saying no means someone will leave. So now you say yes to everything, even things that harm you, because saying no feels unsafe. The fourth habit is needing to control situations. You're a planner. You need to know what's happening next. You get anxious with uncertainty. You try to manage other people's behavior to prevent bad outcomes. You're rigid about how things should be done. You struggle when things don't go according to plan. This is a trauma response to unpredictability. If you grew up in an environment where you couldn't predict what would happen next, where your parent might be loving one moment and abusive the next, where you never knew what mood they'd be in, your nervous system learned that the only safety is through control. If you control every variable, maybe you can prevent bad outcomes. Now, as an adult, your need for control shows up as anxiety when things are uncertain. You're trying to manage the unmanageable because your nervous system never learned that some things are genuinely safe and don't need to be controlled. The fifth habit is over-explaining. You explain your actions in detail. You explain your decisions. You explain why you did something even when no one asked. You add unnecessary justification to simple statements. You feel compelled to make sure people understand your reasoning. This is often a trauma response to being blamed or gaslit. If you grew up with a parent who twisted your words, who blamed you for things you didn't do, who made you feel crazy, you might have learned that if you just explain thoroughly enough, if you can make them understand your perspective, maybe they won't blame you. Maybe they won't hurt you. Now, years later, you still feel compelled to over-explain because part of you is still trying to convince that person that you're not at fault. The sixth habit is flinching easily or being easily startled. Loud noises make you jump. Sudden movements make you flinch. You're on edge. You startle easily even in safe situations. Your body reacts to potential threat before your conscious mind even registers it. This is hypervigilance, and it's a classic trauma response. If you experience threat, whether physical threat, threat of verbal abuse, or threat of abandonment, your nervous system learns to constantly scan for danger. Your body stays in a state of readiness. Your startle response is heightened. This was adaptive when you were in actual danger. But now, even in safe situations, your nervous system is still in threat detection mode. The seventh habit is difficulty with vulnerability or, conversely, oversharing. Some people who are trauma survivors become extremely guarded. They share very little about themselves. They keep people at arm's length. They have difficulty letting anyone know them deeply. Others do the exact opposite, they overshare. They tell people their trauma stories quickly. They're overly open about their problems. Both of these are trauma responses. Overguardedness develops when vulnerability led to harm. If you showed someone your pain and they used it against you, you learned that vulnerability is dangerous. Now you protect yourself by keeping distance. Oversharing often develops when someone had no choice but to be vulnerable, when their trauma was visible and they couldn't hide it, or when they had to tell people their story to survive. Now they've internalized that their trauma is their story, and they lead with it because they don't know how to be known for anything else. Now, here's what's really important to understand about all of these habits. They're not character flaws. They're not personality quirks. They're not things you should just stop doing through willpower. They're responses that your nervous system developed because they helped you survive. Your mind and body were doing their best to keep you safe. But here's the challenge. What helped you survive trauma might not serve you in a safe environment. These habits can actually prevent the very things you want most: genuine connection, peace, freedom, spontaneity, trust. So how do you work with these habits? First, recognize them. That's what we're doing right now. If you see yourself in any of these 7 habits, notice it. Don't judge yourself for it. Just notice. Awareness is the first step. Second, understand the origin. Why do you do this? What was this habit protecting you from? When you understand the reason, you develop compassion for yourself instead of judgment. Third, start to question the habit in safe situations. When you feel the urge to apologize for something that's not your fault, pause. Notice the impulse. You don't have to fight it. Just notice it. When you feel the urge to over-explain, pause and notice. These moments of pause are where change happens. Fourth, practice small acts of resistance. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to be different overnight. It means practicing in small, safe ways. In a safe conversation, try not apologizing when you would normally. Notice what happens. Usually, nothing bad happens. You survived. Your nervous system gets the message that it's safe. Fifth, work with a trauma-informed therapist. These habits are rooted in your nervous system, and your nervous system responds to felt safety. A therapist can help create that felt safety and can guide your nervous system toward a different response. Therapies like EMDR, somatic experiencing, and trauma-focused CBT are specifically designed to help your body and nervous system recognize that you're safe now. Sixth, practice self-compassion. When you catch yourself doing these habits, don't judge yourself. Your nervous system developed these habits as a survival mechanism. That's actually impressive. Your brain kept you alive. Thank your nervous system for working so hard to protect you. Then gently practice something different. Seventh, build genuine safety. These habits persist because your nervous system doesn't fully believe you're safe now. One of the best ways to retrain your nervous system is through genuine safe relationships. When you have people in your life who consistently respect your boundaries, who listen without judgment, who show up for you, your nervous system gradually learns that vulnerability is safe, that people can be trusted, that you don't need these protective habits anymore. Let me give you an example of how this works. Let's say you have the habit of chronic apologizing. You recognize this as a trauma response from having a critical parent. You start working with a therapist. In therapy, you practice not apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Your therapist doesn't judge you. They stay calm. Nothing bad happens. Your nervous system starts to get the message that it's safe to not apologize. Then you practice with a trusted friend. You say something you believe in and you don't apologize. Your friend listens respectfully. Nothing bad happens. Your nervous system learns more. Over time, with repeated experiences of safety, your nervous system starts to trust that you don't need to apologize to be safe, and the habit gradually changes. But here's something important to understand. These habits aren't meant to be judged. If someone in your life has one of these habits, it's not because they're insecure or weak or broken. It's because they survived something that required them to respond this way. So if your partner chronically apologizes, that's not a character flaw you need to fix in them. That's a sign they've survived something that required them to be superadaptive. You can have compassion for that. If your friend has difficulty saying no, that's not them being a pushover. That's them having a nervous system that learned that saying no was unsafe. You can have compassion for that. If you notice these habits in yourself, the same applies. Have compassion for yourself. Your nervous system was doing its job. It was helping you survive. These habits are evidence of your strength, not your weakness. Now, here's something else I want to emphasize. You don't have to change these habits if they're working for you. The goal isn't to be normal or to fit some ideal. The goal is to have freedom. The goal is for you to feel safe enough that you can choose your responses instead of being controlled by automatic nervous system reactions. Some people who have these habits are perfectly fine with them. They've built lives where they can be happy within these patterns. And that's okay. But if these habits are causing you suffering, if they're preventing you from having the relationships you want, if they're exhausting you, then it's worth working on them. The beautiful thing about understanding that these habits are trauma responses is that it opens the door to healing. Because if they're learned responses, they can be unlearned. Your nervous system is plastic. It can change. It can learn that you're safe now. It can learn different patterns. This doesn't happen overnight. Nervous system change takes time, but it absolutely happens. I've seen people transform their entire lives by understanding their trauma responses and working with them compassionately. So if you recognize yourself in any of these 7 habits, I want you to know you're not broken. You're not defective. You're actually quite remarkable because your mind and body figured out how to survive difficult circumstances. That's incredible. Now the work is learning that you can also thrive. You can be safe. You can be vulnerable. You can say no. You can rest. You can trust. You can be known. And that journey starts with recognition, compassion, and patience with yourself. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear in the comments which of these 7 habits you recognize in yourself or in people you know. Have any of these resonated with you? And if you've been working on trauma responses, I'd love to hear about your healing journey. Let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next video.